there was a reason why we did this. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, there were many reasons. The topic itself wasn't in the pool of topics from Reclim. We discussed these topics, and the group of filmmakers was exist in forward of this project, and we discussed it in the group and the different topics, and then one time we expect one moment there isn't the topic around glaciers. The glaciers doesn't exist in this group of films, and then we thought about it, and
There's a personal story.
yeah, there's also a
I think it's very important to tell this story.
yeah, there's also a personal story, because after then, when we decided we would like to make a film about the glaciers, I thought about it, and my father is working in Swiss in the winter season, and then I also talk with him about these glaciers in the Alps, and he is working in the Berner Oberland and near the Aalisch Gletscher and Grindelwald Gletscher, of course, yeah. And yeah, there's and he has the same. He thought the same things which we discussed with Ludwig, and then we go with these informations and with these wish to make this film about glaciers in the Alps to Rolf and to the Avi, and said, one moment, we want to make this film, and yeah, thankful we could make this film with these groups, and yeah, very good.
Yes, it's always filmmaking is fighting for your ideas. That's right. Another question, which I found it very interesting, because the students went to this place twice. First on a research trip, and then they shot. How did the people in the valley react? Because somebody said that they know this for a long time. The glacier going away, but how do you talk with them? How did they react to your questions?
It's a little difficult. We talk about. First of all, I have to say I don't want a part of this first journey. I'm only go in the second time with it. For the first journey, I wasn't in the group, and but what I know was that. You can talk with these people around this glacier, but it's not so present, because every day they have these topics and these theme about there, and it's kind of a daily part. So, and that's not such special as it was for us. So.
And what I understood is they don't see it as any danger. They say, we know this for ages. It's been like that for ages, and there's no danger at all. Yeah. Which I find very strange, because they are confronted with these problems very close, but still they don't react, as far as I know. Do you want to say something? You want to add something? Then come. Yes, then join us. Yes, of course. Because you know these people better than we do.
Yeah, what I can say is that it depends on which people you talk to. There are some people who are very concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very concerned, especially mountain guides. Mountain guides have a very good sensorium. You know, they have seen the changes in the Alps very first-hand, you know. And they really can say that there are dramatic changes, and so people who are informed are actually worried.
Yeah. But we have to. We talked with some people in the village near the glacier, And yeah, there were very different opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I welcome also again Ludwig here on stage, and just for the audience to introduce him a little bit and to understand why is he so enthusiastic with the Alps. So he is from, as you already heard, from Bavarian Academy of Science in Munich, but he started his career on glacier research already in 1976, so during his diploma thesis. And he was fascinated about his unique and fantastic nature, and then did his PhD there and focused on the topic of runoff melting from high mountain glaciers. And from 1994 to 2016, he was scientific head of the Commission of Glaciology at the Bavarian Academy of Science. And he worked not only on Ferner, but also worldwide. So he was in Himalaya and the Central Asia. So he has really a very good insight and sense what's going on with, especially with this alpine glaciers, because if you connect this to Ingo's talk, there is a complete different story about the alpine glaciers. And my questions would be to you. So from your long-term experience, so you started in 76, so there was at that stage or that time climate change was more or less no story. So but it started close after this, at least with the beginning of the 21st century. So what is if you're also taking the worldwide view you have on this, what is the most threatening part of this, and what if you connect this especially with the people living in these regions?
Yeah, the first experience that I had as a student was to work for half a year in the Canadian Arctic. So I was there on the station. And this was actually during a time nobody talked about global warming because the glaciers were advancing in the 60s and in the 70s. The glaciers worldwide were actually advancing. So there was the big question, will we be covered with ice in the future? This ice age imminent, this was in the newspapers. But then after 1980, it is just like you would have changed a switch. And suddenly the glaciers lost mass, a lot of mass. And in Greenland, it's actually only in the last 10 years I've seen from the graph that these losses have advanced and have accelerated. But worldwide, we can say after 1980, we are losing mass everywhere, not only in the Alps, but also in Central Asia, in the Himalayas, everywhere. So the question is, what happened about 40 years ago? And we actually know that the atmosphere that we have around us is also, with a lot of pollution from man, in the 60s and 70s, Wirtschaftswunder, it was called Wirtschaftswunder in Germany. There was a lot of production in industry and a lot of pollution, so our air was actually darkened. Our atmosphere was darkened and there was less radiation coming down from the sun. And therefore we had advances of these glaciers, and now luckily we have actually reduced the emissions, the pollution. We have reduced it, less aerosols in the air, not Feinstaub. Feinstaub is still a big problem. But the point is that we have actually a recovered atmosphere. The atmosphere became cleaner, and therefore the slow increase in temperature, which was actually interrupted for about 30 years. In the 60s, 70s, early 80s, it was cooler, but now it has actually accelerated again with increase in temperature. So the man was actually cooling the atmosphere in the 60s, 70s. And that's what we call the global dimming. And now we are talking about the global brightening. This means now as the atmosphere becomes more clear again, we actually get more sun radiation, and it increased in the Alps by over 10%. So we have an increase of more than 10% of what comes from the solar radiation down to us. So that's one aspect, but there are many more aspects. For instance, what I've talked in this interview just before, higher temperatures cause also more water vapor pressure in the air. More water vapor, and the water vapor is also a very potent greenhouse gas, not only CO2 and methane. Methane is, of course, a very strong one. But the point is that with the increasing temperatures, we have more water vapor in the air, and that is increasing melt rates dramatically, because as soon as you have a threshold level of 6.11 hectopascal, 0 degree on the glacier surface and snow surface, that's the saturation water pressure. When the pressure in the air is higher, then you have condensation. And this has happened in the last, say, 15, 20 years, much stronger condensation than evaporation. Before, when the water vapor pressure was low, you had evaporation from snow and ice. But now we have condensation, and when condensation occurs, then you have a release of energy. Right. So it's not only increased solar radiation, but also increased condensation on the glaciers, and that accelerates.
Yeah, so the feedbacks of the system, of the climate system, highly complicated, but there are certain processes which foster the effects and then the impact on climate warming. But coming back to the experience you have also in Himalaya, there is also not only the global view that finally sea level rise, but also for the local community. So the reduction of drink water due to, because the glaciers are that storage for drink water and fresh water there. Have you also been experienced this, and what this makes to this local communities? So thinking about our connections, we would drive later on to the Pacific Ocean.
Yes. Yeah, this is a very important aspect, is how much water comes from the glaciers, and that was part of the movie that we have heard and seen. And the point really is that in the Alps we have quite a humid and quite a wet lowland, like the lowland in Munich and Vienna, etc. There is quite a lot of rain. Therefore, the meltwater that comes from snow and ice, and particularly from the ice, is not as important in Europe as compared, for instance, in the areas in Central Asia where we have desert lands around the mountains. So if you have, for instance, the Pamir Mountains, you have desert land around it, and the only water that really comes from in those rivers like Amu Darya, Sir Darya, etc., this is really fast, only about 80-90% comes from melting from snow and ice. And therefore, and there is no rain. And therefore, in those areas, this reduction in glaciation will be, on the long term, a severe problem. But not with us. With us, we are just blessed with a lot of water from the rain, and therefore we have not such a big problem. But worldwide, we have the increase in the water level, sea level rise, and now, at this time, with the melting of the alpine glaciers, this is a substantial amount that is contributed to the sea level rise. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to give the opportunity for the audience also, and there I see.
That's okay. Okay.
Ja, hallo erstmal, schönen guten Tag. Pardon. I greet you, and I'm really grateful to see these movies. Thank you so much for doing this and doing all the research and the science and all that. But in the movie, in the last one, I have one question because I didn't understand. What is glacier mills? What are glacier mills? I have never heard that.
A glacier mill is a deep hole in the middle of a glacier. For instance, you have a little creek running down on the surface of the glacier, and then suddenly it disappears vertically into to the bottom. And they are moulins. They are called moulins, the French house expression. So this is Gletschermühle, you know, and the water disappears there, and it's very dangerous to fall down there. So you should never fall in one of those.
That's right, and that you also observe in Greenland, for example, a massive ice sheet of nearly 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers thick, and these mills have diameters of meters or up to 10 meters, and huge meltwater streams from the surface go into this glacier to the glacier bed, and then this is one of the consequences of this melting. Then the friction at the bottom, the glacier with the bedrock reduces, and then the whole ice sheet or the glaciers start to accelerate, and this then provokes what Ingo said, provokes a discharge of ice from the center. So bringing this fresh water to the bottom, this is also an important process and an incredible important process for the disintegration of the ice sheets.
No, the stones are not as important as in those glacier mills that we see, for instance, Lucerne. And there are some places where you have these deep holes on the ground, and there the stones had some effect of grinding, but this is all in ice, what we are looking at, these moulins. They are just ice phenomenon.
An additional question to Steve. So when you started your project, I guess, and we did a seminar with you to introduce you to the topic, we had the feeling climate change is not a topic for young students at that time, and during that, so they when they're going to make films, they think of nice films of the surrounding, love films, or whatever. So you took the chance to go to this exotic topic. Looking back, does this make anything to you, to thinking about human future, the Earth's development? So your work in this topic, climate change, does it change your insights on this and also your behavior, maybe?
Difficult question.
Yes.
I think in the really in the time really after this project, I would say yes. But some years after then, there are new projects and there are new topics, and so it was a great time, of course, and really I would say also in front of this project, I wasn't somebody who is the nature equal, but it's not that way that it changed my whole life. That I couldn't say. So.
You had more insights.
Yeah, of course, through the project, of course. Yeah, more information and we discussed and we take a really long time in this topic and in this material, and of course there is more information as my friends or
who didn't do it.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, there's another question in the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting topic what you just said, like how is it changing our behavior, especially the so-called younger generation, which I still call myself to that generation. So my question is that we just saw in the first movie that the melting of the ice in Greenland or the Antarctic will affect or is already affecting a lot of people all over the world. And as we learned in this movie, the glacier in the Alps is affecting, as I remember, like 1% of the overall ice. And so my question is like what, because I'm wondering like when will, as you just said, like when will this young generation, like when will we wake up and we are not affected by the melting sea or by the rising sea level yet, but we will at one point that then we will be old and then we can, there's nothing we can do anymore. What will happen if the Alps, as it was said in the movie in 2100, it will be totally gone? Will that affect our climate in Europe and Germany at all? Or like, how can we when will our wake-up call, even then it's way too late and it's already happening everywhere and we should already be awake, but we are not, especially in the Western European society. Like, when will be there an effect in, let's say, Germany, in Berlin? When will we finally feel this climate change? Our grandchildren, or like, yeah, if that is a question, if you understand what I mean.
Okay, one point is that the amount of melting has so much increased in the last, say, 40 years that I've talked about, and that has increased runoff. So we do get more runoff now, but on the long run, when the glaciers disappear, that meltwater will be lacking. But as I had said, in the Alps, where we have enough water from rain in the lowlands, this will be not a catastrophe. This lack of water that will not be coming from the ice melting. So in the Alps and surrounding areas of the Alps, this is not a real problem, but it will be a big problem for the tourist industry. Once these glaciers are gone, then of course there will be less people being able to ski on these glaciers, etc., etc. But
it's a problem. I mean, there are
yeah,
climate change problems way more severe than people.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm totally with you, but we cannot say that due to the melting of these glaciers, we will have a big problem in Central Europe. It's not here, but in other parts of the world. But the big thing is that with increased temperatures, we also get much more massive rainfall, much more intensive rainfall. And therefore, we will also get more flooding locally. So in a way, there are many other side effects from this global warming that are probably much more severe than the lack of glacier melting in the Alps. So that's all I wanted to say, on this topic.
Well, as far as I know, the Alps are something like rubble or stones glued together in the form of permafrost. And as far as I know, in the future there will be more avalanches, not from snow, but from stones. And there are projects in Austria, in Germany, and in Switzerland that are trying to improve the forests to keep those dangers off the settlements. And in so far, I think probably there are more complex effects, not only from melting snow or glaciers, but from other effects on that kind of landscape.
Yeah, this is very true that about twice as much large area as the glaciers, we have permafrost area. It's about double the size of that part of the glaciers. But the permafrost is restricted to areas above about 3,000 meters. So it's well above the tree line. The tree line is maybe at 2,000 meters. So these problems are much higher than the forests. So in a way, this is a real bomb that is ticking, like that those cement, the ice in the soil and in the rocks is like a cement. And when this ice is melting, then a lot of rock areas will crumble and we will have a lot of landslides. So this is a very serious problem for our Alps. This is absolutely true. Yeah.
And we have two final questions.
Just a comment. I think we don't need a wake-up call because we already have climate change here in Germany, and you had this flooding in Berlin 3 times last year. So I think it's already here. So we don't have to wait for a wake-up call. And maybe I would like to ask first the film student, were you fascinated by the glacier when you saw it? And when I looked at you, when you talked about glaciers in the film, so you spend all your life doing research on it. And so what is the beauty of glacier and what is the fascination for you on glacier? So maybe both of you could give an answer. Maybe that can change habits as well.
For me, I can say, of course, I was very excited and very wow when I'm standing in front of this glacier, and especially in front of the glacier Tor, the Great Hole. That was wow! I never seen such such things before, and we have a small piece of things in our mind, what pictures we can get in this documentary, but when we stand in front of this with our cameras and our ideas, and the whole team were wow. That's what we can say. But we hadn't the experience in front of these projects, so we seen everything from these things as our first time. So
yeah, for me it was really as a young person I did a lot of mountaineering, so I got in contact with the ice and with the snow, and ski touring was one of my hobbies. And then going to the Arctic for half a year and working there in snow and ice has actually changed my attitude a lot. And I got a lot of love for these areas. But as I said, we see it disappear. And this is, of course, also a grief for me to see the ice masses disappearing in the Alps. However, I think we really have to find out what we should be doing. And I personally believe that we actually would know in our heart what should be done. We should restrict the burning of fossil fuels. We should be less possessive of things. But we don't do it. And this is also what I said in the movie. It's a big human dilemma that we basically know we should not smoke, but we do smoke, and we eat too much sugar and we shouldn't, and so on. We do things that we should not do, and in a way, I think that's the wake-up call that is necessary. It's that we need a change of heart. We need a change of heart inside, and how this comes about. Every person has an individualistic story and an individualistic path. But I would wish for every one of us that we would have this change of heart. So,
great words. Thank you very much. Final question. The final question, please make it short, because otherwise
you actually just answered my question, because my question was: how do you not lose hope? Like, I am the young generation, and I consider myself woke. And I think everyone who sits in this event now is kind of woke, but we can't do anything. Like, we are not politicians or something, and we know that some media, broadcast television companies also buy scientists to say there isn't climate change. So what do you do?
Okay, it's not the scientists who say that. They are lobbies, certain lobbies, like the ones who would like... But
there are scientists that are bought by those people. Yeah. I don't know if you...
Yeah, unfortunately there's always somebody who is using their talents for a bad purpose, I'm sure. That's what parts of the facts of life. But I would say 90% of all scientists have the heart at the right spot, I would say. And at Alfred Wegener Institute, you are really studying the oceans as well. This is something that has not been talked about yet. Is that the oceans, not only the ice, but the oceans, is such a big topic. And I really think that's where the future, or a lot of young people would study the oceans. That's where we will get a lot of new insights, and hopefully also a more bright future when we study all these situations associated with the oceans. I've never been invited to the Davos Economic Forum. But I personally believe that a lot of people in politics and also in economy do know about these things, but they are also bound by pressures from Aktionäre. You know, they want a lot of sales, stock markets and so on. And this is just on a higher level, the same thing as we have every day when we are making choices. What should we be doing today, and what should we eat today? And I just say we actually use travel with the airplanes a lot because our children are all distributed around the world. But this is a very bad thing for the climate. So I know personally I am inconsistent in terms of these questions, not only society as a whole, but also personally. So all I want to say, we have to work at our